Well, we're almost at the end of the day of, I guess, day and a half. We're at the end of the day of the day and a half. And we still have a half day to go tomorrow. And what a lovely spiritual and informative retreat it has been so far. And I'm always amazed with no coordination between the speakers. Somehow our topics all seem to fit together really, really well. It's kind of like a potluck dinner where nobody plans what they're going to bring, but you always get what you need. And it's just right. And we've had Kusama speak about chaplaincy and the Kalyana Mitra and Bhaktika and radical friendship. And then Sistama's brilliant efforts at trying to rein us all in like herding cats into elicit from us a way and to find a way forward into how do we incorporate all this into our mentoring and Kalyana Mitra thinking. So I don't know if what I have to say will be of any assistance or not, but these are my musings on it. And I'm going to reflect on my journey in considering what term fits for me and why. Now, I have to declare right off the top that Kalyana Mitra is a word that I love. I've heard that word for a long time, and to me, it just rolls off the tongue very well. And when spoken, the word itself seems to be rich in warmth and kindness. I like words. So long before I really delved into the meaning and the responsibility of Kalyana Mitra, I just thought it would be really, really cool to have some affinity with that word. So as I was preparing for this talk today, much was revealed for me that had been lurking in my subconscious, my unconscious, or my ignorance regarding my lack of affinity to the other possibilities beyond the cursory comfort or discomfort with the words themselves. Acceptance, compassion, equanimity are just a few of the words I would use to describe what is necessary for me in a relationship with others, whether it be one of spiritual discovery or not. So in exploring Kalyana Mitra, I came up with the spiritual words and roles I have encountered in my journey. Guru, disciple, mentor, mentee, Kalyana Mitra, spiritual friend. So I'm going to start with Guru because I was introduced to this teacher relationship concept fairly early in my yoga and Buddhist journey. Not necessarily large G guru, but certainly a small G guru teacher, and more importantly, the role of discipleship learner in spiritual growth and development of the learner. So guru, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is described as a mentor, a guide, an expert, or a master of a certain knowledge or field. In other dictionaries, like the Cambridge Dictionary, it describes a guru as a religious leader or a teacher in the Hindu or Sikh religion, and more informally, a person skilled in something who gives advice. And the American English Thesaurus indicates that the concept of guru often extends beyond physical presence and can encompass spiritual guidance, inspiration, and transmission of knowledge through various means. Now, guru is a Sanskrit word, and in Sanskrit, it means heavy or dispeller of darkness. To be a guru is to be a person of weight and substance, a teacher, a spiritual teacher who dispels the darkness of ignorance and leads his disciples toward the light of knowledge. In ancient times, a guru was considered to be equal to God and was revered as the source of all knowledge and wisdom. The exact role of the guru varies from tradition to tradition, but in its most exalted form, devotion to the guru is paramount. Now, from a Western point of view, it often looks like such devotion is questionable at best and has been subject to abuses. And we have seen this in various large and small orders over the years. So what is a disciple? Again, one of the dictionaries, Merriam-Webster, describes a disciple as one who accepts and assists in spreading the doctrines of another, a convinced adherent of a school or individual. We most often hear the word disciple in the Christian language regarding the 12 disciples of Christ. Regardless, the overall accepted Western view of disciple is one who accepts and assists in spreading the doctrines of another, a convinced adherent of a school or individual, someone who's part of an inner circle. Why does this even matter? In this weekend's theme of mentoring and spiritual friendship, well, it matters to me because bias and past experience calls on me to think very carefully before deciding on a word or a term, which then will guide my thinking within the role. My first experience with a guru was harsh. I had studied at a particular school of yoga for some time, and I held this school and its programs in very high regard, and I still do. However, I witnessed the head of the spiritual yoga institution publicly and harshly confront two of his most experienced teachers in front of a whole room of students. It was not an error in judgment by the teachers, but as he saw it, an incomplete explanation of a spiritual question, and one that slightly diverged from his preferred perspective. At that very moment, I was appalled. It was like a virtual slap in the face that could be heard throughout the room. To me, kindness, understanding, and respectful behavior are paramount in a relationship that has a power imbalance, even if there is a differing of opinion or if a correction of a fact is needed to be made. I didn't like it at all. Afterwards, I spoke to the two teachers. They were both women of strength, education, and they did not even entertain the notion of an imbalance of power or inappropriate behavior in what had happened. They didn't even understand the modeling of this behavior to a group of non-disciples, and I was flabbergasted. This was but one example of I have seen in this type of guru, teacher, disciple relationship of misuse and abuse of power. I think we in the West have, at least in spiritual settings, embraced some of the meaning of guru through the Sanskrit definition to that of godlike qualities. And when a teacher or guru wants disciples, it already seems to foster a great imbalance of power and obedience to the teacher beyond which I can tolerate or witness. An expectance of obedience of often new, inexperienced, vulnerable practitioners who may not notice at first the demeaning and possible grooming nature of the power relationship. Again, that isn't what we're talking about in our mentoring and Kalyana Mitra relationship, but I think there are elements here we need to be aware of. In the end, for me, a spiritual relationship with others needs to be one of equal respect, kindness, and humility and sharing of knowledge. Of course, at times there will be an imbalance of knowledge. There will be seekers, there will be providers. But in the relationship itself, never an imbalance or misuse of power or demeaning behavior. Now we move on to mentor. So what does a mentor mean to me? Well, again, I go to dictionaries, right? I always have to look up the meaning. So various dictionaries describe a mentor as an experienced and trusted advisor, someone who advises or trains, a trusted counselor or guide, a mentor who, because they are detached, can hold up a mirror to us, a tutor or a coach. So generally accepted, the role of the mentor is to provide guidance, advice, feedback, and support to the mentee, as well as serving as their role model, teacher, counselor, advisor, sponsor, advocate, ally. You will provide the mentee with all their tools to be able to become a better version of themselves. A mentor influences the personal or professional growth of the mentee. This is a lot of responsibility and the underlying assumption that the mentee needs to improve somehow. It is to me such a dry word that seems, on first blush anyway, to be emotionally reserved, intellectual, and not very heartfelt. Now, my experience with mentors and mentees takes me back to my years of work. I would always provide a new hire with a mentor for the first few months or so in order to help the new person learn the ropes or the system within which they had been hired. It was a time of enculturation so that there was an understanding of the nuance of their new employer. Sort of, this is how it's done and this is why we do it. I had an expectation the mentee already had the skills and knowledge to do their job, or they wouldn't have been hired in the first place. This was, however, a time to note if indeed there was a gap in that skill base, and if indeed some further supervisory training would be sufficient, or indeed the gap was too large and the employment would be terminated. So my past experience with the role of mentor-mentee has left me with a somewhat impersonal view of those roles, and I have difficulty relating to it within the spiritual relationship. Now that brings us to Kalyana Mitra, spiritual friend. And that is the term or relationship that resonates mostly with me. Kalyana Mitra, or spiritual friend, for me, embodies the meaningful relationship that I think many of us seek. It's certainly one that I seek and aspire to. An admirable friendship, a friend who inspires me to live a higher level of spiritual and ethical life, a friend who has qualities of love, depth, wisdom, compassion, a virtuous friend, a noble friend, a friend that lives their vow or beliefs as best as possible, a heart-centered friend, and it suggests to me qualities that I may have and wish to foster and share. There is an implied sense of mutuality, perhaps even an affinity. In the often quoted exchange from the Upada Sutta, Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, suggests to the Buddha that spiritual friendships are half of the spiritual life. And you heard Sistama speak about this earlier, but we're going to hear some of these things again. And the Buddha corrects him and says, "Not so, Ananda, not so, Ananda. This is the entire spiritual life, Ananda. That is good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship." The Buddha goes on to explain that having good spiritual friends is beneficial in two ways. Good friends help the practitioner to practice better. He or she is able to embody the noble eightfold path of right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. A practitioner is also able to attain the goal of the spiritual life through his or her friendship and with the emulation of the Buddha. By relying on me as a good friend, Ananda, beings subject to birth are freed from birth, beings subject to aging are freed from aging, beings subject to death are freed from death, beings subject to sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair are freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair. So what the Buddha meant by being a good friend is amplified in the Siglata Sutta, in which the Buddha offers life advice to a young Brahmin. He suggests there are 4 types of loyal or good-hearted friends: the helpful friend, who looks after you when you are inattentive, looks after your possessions when you are inattentive. He is a refuge when you are afraid. And when some business is to be done, he lets you have twice what you ask for. The friend who is the same in happy and unhappy times, tells you his secrets. He guards your secrets. He does not let you down in misfortune. He would even sacrifice his life for you. The friend who points out what is good for you, keeps you from wrongdoing. He supports you in doing good. He informs you of what you did not know, and he points out the path to heaven. And the sympathetic friend does not rejoice at your misfortune, rejoices at your good fortune, stops others who speak against you, and commends others who speak in praise of you. So in the words of the Metta Sutta, translated by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, he gives what is beautiful and hard to give, does what is hard to do, endures painful, ill-spoken words. His secrets he tells you, your secrets he keeps. When misfortunes strike, he doesn't abandon you. When you're down and out, he doesn't look down on you. A person in whom these traits are found is a friend to be cultivated by anyone wanting a friend. Friendship calls for us to be committed to the other's well-being, to share activities and experiences, and to self-reveal certain kinds of things that are important to us, but not quite in the same way as a spousal relationship. It is a more nuanced relationship that is responsive to the particular needs of the person given their overall context and development and in their spiritual life and heart. Which then to me is a Kalyana Mitra. I believe that being and having a Kalyana Mitra offers an extension beyond the relationship itself. It offers a way in which to engage in the world, and maybe offers a way to peace and kindness and open-hearted conversations and actions with those we know and those we don't know, those we like and those we don't like. We live in difficult and disturbing times, and finding and perhaps becoming a Kalyana Mitra, a spiritual friend, allows each of us the opportunity to explore and challenge ourselves and others in a kind and accepting way within our Buddhist beliefs. For me, living my beliefs or vows is important, but can become difficult without the support or the mirror of a spiritual friend. The Maggiya Sutta is a Pali text about friendship. It tells the story of the eager young monk Maggiya, who wanted to practice meditation alone in an especially peaceful and beautiful mango grove. But Maggiya's meditation was anything but peaceful and beautiful. To his shock, he found his mind a snarl of malicious, lustful, and confused thoughts, probably because his practice was maybe a little too self-involved. When Maggiya rushed back to report his confusing experience, Buddha was not surprised. He took the opportunity to give Maggiya what he thought he must have hoped was a relevant teaching. 5 things induce release of heart and lasting peace, the Buddha told him. First, a lovely intimacy with good friends. Second, virtuous conduct. Third, frequent conversation that inspires and encourages practice. Fourth, diligence, energy, and enthusiasm for the good. And fifth, insight into impermanence. Then for Maggiya's further benefit and to cement the point, the Buddha goes through the list again, this time preceding each of the other items with the first. When there is a lovely intimacy between friends, then there is virtuous conduct. When there is a lovely intimacy between friends, then there is conversation that inspires and encourages practice. When there is a lovely intimacy between friends, then there is diligence, energy, and enthusiasm for the good. And when there is a lovely intimacy between friends, there is insight into impermanence. In other words, friendship is the most important element in the spiritual path. Everything else naturally flows from it. For a Kalyana Mitra, loving and appreciating your friends, even when they are difficult, as they sometimes are, is the path's fullness and completion. Friendship ripens and deepens our capacity for compassion. These days, when we talk about relationships, the word usually suggests romantic relationship. But we might also mean our connections with parents, children, siblings, colleagues. But we don't hear so much about friendship. Yet friendship may be the most wonderful form of human relationship, that we and our friends can communicate intimately with one another and support each other unselfishly, come what may. It is also, I believe, our best hope in troubled times. When things are tough, having a trusted friend to help shoulder the burden makes survival not only infinitely more possible, but also much lovelier. Often we seek our friends not sacredly, but with an adulterated passion. In other words, most friendship falls short of the spiritual friendship the Buddha is referring to in the Maggia Sutta. We're often looking for something from the other person: entertainment, sympathy, some kind of support. Unable to stand the fullness of the other, we don't want to discover and offer of our own. Our friendship is based on mutual interest, attraction, social necessity, someone to talk to, someone to play with or socialize with. This is normal and healthy, yet it is not spiritual friendship. Spiritual friendship is more than just a personal connection. It is about helping one another grow in faith and goodness, compassion, acceptance, and equanimity. In ordinary friendships, we might connect right away with lots to share and learn from one another. In spiritual life, friendship develops much more slowly. It may take years to share backgrounds and personal stories, and maybe we never do. But in the meantime, we slowly get to know one another intimately in the silent space of meditation. We share the sounds of our voices joined in chanting. We hear our groans, our fatigue, the ways we cope when we don't have our usual social strategies available. Spiritual friends are honest with one another. They have courage. They take risks, and they speak from the standpoint of truthfulness, not expediency, but with tenderness and kindness. Often the most unlikely people show up in Buddhist communities, people who under ordinary circumstances would never meet and spend weeks, maybe years together. Yet this disparate group of people manages to find harmony, commonality, and deep mutual appreciation despite their differences. They come to share something more fundamental than their interests and affinities. It's not unusual to be in a community with someone who pushes all our buttons. The sort of person we'd avoid at all costs in ordinary life will suddenly appear in our Sangha. Then he or she is our father or our sister, our childhood nemesis or ancient school or workplace enemy, sitting right across from us, or in our post-COVID era, right in the next screen on Zoom. We have to deal with this person in ways we never would have if left to our own devices, and eventually they become a valued friend. It is said that Dogen writes of the power of kind speech. Speak to sentient beings as you would to a baby. Speak with that much tender love and sweetness. I can receive a true friend's criticism with loving kindness because it comes from a loving heart. seeking only my benefit and well-being. And if I find I'm lacking in tenderness, speaking what I consider to be the truth out of defensiveness or separateness, I have to discern this. I have to work on healing the causes within myself of this breach of kindness. I need to keep my peace until I am ready to speak with love. Norman Fisher wrote, in the Mahayana Sutras, teachers are referred to as Kalyana Mitras, spiritual friends. They are people who see us as we are, love us anyway, and care absolutely for our ultimate welfare. And over time, in community life or Sangha, we come to have such inspiring friendships with others who support and love us in the same way. No matter what their background or personal style, anyone with enough proximity in sincere practice becomes a Sangha friend. We will treat them with full respect and affectionate regard, and they will treat us the same way. He goes on to say the Buddha thought of the Sangha as a harmonious group of spiritual friends looking out for one another's welfare, living together in full equality for the spiritual development of each one. The early Buddhist Sangha was radical in its insistence that anyone, prince or pauper, could join and be fully accepted and equally loved. Rank was established solely on the basis of seniority, without regard to wealth, social position, or even skill in practice. And to this day, Buddhism retains this emphasis on equality and inclusion, but to be sure, this ideal isn't always practiced very well. As is well known, women were and still are not included as equals with men in Asian Buddhism. Buddhist communities in the West are far from free of sexism and are overwhelmingly made up of white middle-class people. We notice this, hope that it will change, and work to make it happen, but it will take time, and many more women teachers and teachers of color. However, throughout all these changes, it is necessary to foster finding and becoming a Kalyana Mitra. This summer, I read a book called Together, A Manifesto Against a Heartless World by Etchi Tamokaran. Now, this book is not a Buddhist tome. In fact, it was written by a Turkish exile, a journalist. However, it did resonate deeply within me as it professed many of the beliefs and qualities that I hold dearly and in fact attribute to Kalyana Mitra or spiritual friend. Each of the 10 chapters focuses on living in today's world with heart, faith, and friendship, and how these qualities will sustain us and change the world. She talks about moving away from the false narrative of surface love, the networking love of social media, the reciprocal friendship love of the business promoting promise of ideal friendships. She talks about friendship being the ultimate and most sophisticated form of justice. At the core of such friendship is not sentimental love, but a moral stance, a commitment to acquire and maintain a certain perspective on life and humankind. Perhaps a Kalyana Mitra. As she described collecting rocks and stones on a beach and how it was decided which ones were worthy of keeping, I was reminded of the qualities, again, of Kalyana Mitra. To see the heart of the stone or to find a heart in the stone requires a way of looking that is shaped by loving attention, not a judgmental look that weighs the value of the stone, or a scrutinizing one that sees the unfitting aspects of it. What makes the stone look back at us is that all-embracing attention that makes a certain familiarity in the stone suddenly visible. Becoming spiritual friends is not so different. In the beginning, it is just a loose stitch initiated by a warm regard that enables the other person to look back at us. The rest of the relationship depends on what we weave together through words in order to make sense of the world and of each other. And in times of total nonsense, and yes, there are these periods of time in history, the conversation of friends is still there to create meaning from scratch. When friendship has a solid foundation that allows it to mature, friends and conversation with friends eventually becomes the gravitational force in one's life. Friendship is the most profound confirmation that you are able to see the beauty in humankind and the ultimate recognition, the fact that you are, as well, a human. This is the nature of spiritual friendship. It never depends on division or discrimination between people. Love can't be exclusive. It is boundless, empty, open, free. Spiritual friendship is too. No doubt this is an ideal we can never completely realize. But I believe it was what the Buddha had in mind when he taught that there is no element of the path more precious or more important than spiritual friendship. I believe that if we can foster the Kalyana Mitra within and without, the ripple effect will be unmeasurable. If I continue to watch and observe, will I now recognize spiritual friends where previously I would have missed them? Given all the suffering in the world, can I extend spiritual friendship beyond my Sangha into the Sangha of the world? I hope so. For I believe this is the only way to embrace a change in perspective towards humanity and our journey in the Pure Land. And what I have a poem I'd like to read, and it is from I don't know, some of you may have written, there was a book out, The First Free Women Early Buddhist Nuns Poetry. And there's a poem in there on Mita, friend. And these were nuns that lived thousands of years ago. Full of trust, you left home and soon learned to walk the path, making yourself a friend to everyone and making everyone a friend. When the whole world is your friend, fear will find no place to call home. And when you make the mind your friend, you'll know what trust really means. Listen, I have followed this path of friendship to its end, and I can say with absolute certainty, it will lead you home. And it leaves you with a question of, what is home? Is it a place, a person, a feeling? And is our practice a form of leaving home or returning home, or both? Perhaps the question that we should pose ourselves each day are, how have I been a spiritual friend? Who offered spiritual friendship to me today? Did someone inspire the Kalyana Mitra within me today? And probably the most important question of all, was I unable to speak to someone today with tender, loving kindness? What do I need to heal within myself in order to do so? Namo Mitra.